It doesn't go far enough. That's the reaction from many climate scientists to the government's $2.9 billion plan to reduce our emissions. Take a look at some of the details. $569 million going towards a new scrap and replace scheme. This to support low to middle income families to scrap their petrols for EVs. $20 million to lease EVs to Kiwis who can't afford a new car. $350 million funding the Transport Choices Fund for cycleways, walkways, greener and better public transport. $61 million going towards improving bus drivers' pay and conditions, and the list goes on. Joining me this morning to discuss is the Climate Change Minister, James Shaw. Minister, good morning.
Morning.
How are you feeling about the reaction to it? Obviously, there's a lot of people who say you haven't gone far enough. I think Thomas Coughlin in the Herald says you've got methane on your breath.
Yeah, look, ultimately the emissions budgets that are what the plan is supposed to meet were given to us by the Climate Change Commission. And the Climate Change Commission was set up precisely so that, for people like me who want to go, much further and faster, and people who are saying, actually, no, we shouldn't be doing anything at all, or we should be moving slower. The whole point of having an independent, expert-led body with some of the country's top scientists is to actually give us that view and to say, here's what we should be doing in these time periods. Having said that, part of the mechanism here is that they can then review the most recent evidence, and when we come up for the next decision cycle, which is only in 2024, it's right around the corner, that they might decide that actually we need to sharpen those targets up based on the most recent evidence.
Because they did recommend, in the most recent report, they did recommend reducing the herd size, but that didn't happen. I'm interested to know what you recommended to Cabinet and they rejected. Did you suggest reducing the herd size?
So actually the Climate Change Commission didn't recommend reducing the herd size. What they said was that we need to bring methane emissions down, and we absolutely do need to do that. And they said that would be the equivalent of a herd size reduction. One of the things I get a little bit frustrated about is I think people lose sight of the fact that the goal that we're working towards here is a reduction in the pollution that comes from the agricultural sector, like we're seeing in all of the other sectors of the economy.
So it would have the effect of reducing, the equivalent effect of reducing the herd size. You're talking about science and technological advances and other things.
Yeah, what I'm saying is that there's a number of different ways that you can reduce agricultural greenhouse gases. And we've spent about $200 million on research and development over the course of the last dozen years or so. The challenge that we've got is that many of the things that we know work already, and in some cases that actually is, de-intensifying some farms, reducing their input costs like additional feed or fertiliser, actually makes those farms more profitable, as well as reducing their greenhouse gases. But in some farms, they may have other tools and techniques that they want to use. The focus that we have to have now is we need to get stuff out of the lab and onto the farm, out of the sort of the field of experimentation that we've been doing over the past 10 years or so, and actually get that stuff rolled out. That's the investment that we're making in this emissions reduction plan.
Okay, is there anything you took to Cabinet you wanted them to do and they said no? And if so, what was it?
Ryan, I mean, to tell you the truth, I don't actually kind of keep lists. So the onus here was on the agencies that are responsible for the different sectors of the economy to say, well, how are you going to meet the kind of targets for your sector, and ultimately it was up to those agencies and their responsible ministers to develop plans to reduce emissions. In the plan itself, what you'll see is that ministers and the chief executives of those agencies have individual responsibility and accountability for reducing emissions in their sectors, but they also have collective responsibility across the whole economy to actually hit those overall budgets. And so we know that in some places things are going to move faster than we hadn't anticipated. In other areas, things might not work out as well as we'd like. So having that accountability at the collective level between ministers and with the chief executives of those agencies is really critical to being able to manage those overs and unders over time and ensure that we hit our overall emissions budgets.
You said yesterday that this plan will allow us to reduce our emissions and to continue to grow our economy. Will we grow at a slower pace? The result of this plan, will it mean that we shave a little bit off GDP? If so, how much?
The Climate Change Commission estimated that it would, over about 30 years, have an impact of about 1% of GDP, or just over 1% of GDP. They also pointed out that not doing this would actually shave twice that amount off GDP. And so this is actually the least cost option that we've got in front of us, which is to actually transform our economy so that it's more productive as well as being more sustainable and more inclusive.
So you're saying that this plan, not the Climate Change Commission's recommendations, but this plan will cost us 1% in GDP over 30 years?
Well, this plan is based on the Climate Change
but it's not
Commission's
identical, right?
recommendations.
Yeah, it's not identical, right? I'm just trying to clarify.
Yeah, sure. They didn't give us specific policy recommendations. They said here are areas of policy that the government needs to develop in response to the emissions budgets that they were proposing.
So have you done a calculation based on your policies what that will cost the economy?
What I'm saying is that if we hit the budgets and that we've put into the plan, then that will be about 1% of GDP. That's what the Commission modelled.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about the cars. So the $570 million to pay to scrap the old cars and to encourage the purchase of EVs. Can you describe for us what an old gas guzzler is?
Well, most New Zealanders drive second-hand cars, and people on lower incomes, for obvious reasons, tend to purchase the cheapest models available, and they tend to be, by definition, older and less efficient and actually very expensive to run. So whilst people might, kind of be able to afford the upfront cost of the vehicle, what happens over time is that those vehicles cost an enormous amount in both maintenance and fuel costs. So one of the things that we can do to lower household living costs is to give people the ability to switch away from those kinds of vehicles. So that's the intention of the scrappage scheme that we're proposing. There have been examples overseas where those things have worked well, and also examples of where they have worked less well than you'd like. So we are starting with a very limited trial of only 2,500 vehicles, and then that will inform the final policy design.
How many cars do you expect to, once the trial is done, how many cars do you expect the $570 million will help us to transition?
Well, we don't have an exact number, but they're expecting that it will be in the tens of thousands.
Okay, that seems quite expensive. So $570 million will help us transition tens of thousands of cars.
Well, yes, but vehicles are a reasonably expensive asset.
Yeah, how many?
Like I said,
how much would you pay per vehicle?
Well, in the trial, they're looking at about something on the order of $6,000 to $10,000 per vehicle.
So if I have an old gas guzzler, I'm on a low or middle income, and I would like an EV, you would say, okay, we'll give you $6,000 to $10,000 when you go to buy it.
Remember, it's not.
That's still going to.
Brian,
if you're on a low income, even if you're given $6,000, you're not going to buy a brand new car, are you?
No, you're not. And, I think it's a mistake to say that it's all about purchasing electric vehicles. It isn't. There are a number of other options available. So one of the things that we're looking at is, in some cases, people might be able to use that for to subsidise public transport or to buy e-bikes in some places where that's the best thing for them to do. But also, the point is, for many houses, actually just getting another petrol car, but one that's way more efficient, would have a huge beneficial impact on their household living
so
costs.
You could
because
use...
the cost of fuel would be so much lower.
Right, so the money
so
could
you can
be
get,
used,
for example,
to transition to a petrol car, but a 1,300 litre, a 1.3 litre instead of a 3.
Well, if you look at second-hand Priuses, there's thousands of those on the market at quite low prices, and if you were able to just get them into the zone where a low-income family was able to afford them, then that would perfectly suit their needs, and that would really dramatically lower their household living costs at the same time.
Okay. Minister, thank you very much for your time this morning. Really appreciate it. Oh, what kind of car have you got, Minister? What do you drive?
I drove an electric vehicle.
Oh, yeah. Is it what sort? Not a Tesla?
No. Oh. No, it's a Hyundai.
Ah, yeah, the Kona. Is it the Kona?
No, it's an Ioniq.
All right. OK. Well, thanks so much for your time this morning, Climate Change Minister James Shaw.
Minister, can I just ask quickly, if you're giving somebody, say, $6,000 to $10,000 for their car and they can use it on public transport, how do you know they're going to spend $6,000 on public transport?
Well, like I said, the purpose of the trial is to work out precisely how that's going to work. So, if you've got integrated ticketing, which is also coming down the line, then you could preload people's transport cards so that they can use those on pretty much any form of transport. Now, that's not going to work for every family in every part of the country, right?
No.
So, this is what I'm saying, is that you kind of have to have a range of options available. But the really important thing here is, I think, as we make this transition, we absolutely have to do everything we can to make sure that we're bringing everyone with us and that we're not leaving anyone behind. Because if the whole transition means that people who are already economically excluded continue to be excluded, then the whole work program, frankly, is unsustainable.
Climate Change Minister James Shaw, thanks very much.